Very briefly, I know that this is the last session today and it's the third day and all of us were a little bit tired, so we're going to try to make this kind of fun, so please bear with us. And with that, Sam, you can start.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for sticking around to the very end. My name is Sam Miles. So I come from Eli Lilly in the Pharmacometrics group, where I'm doing automation and AI, and so I'm operating as a specialist in that area. But my background is less on the PK modeler side and more on actually the AI modeler side. So I have a background in being able to actually build some of these AI models. So a little bit of a unique perspective, and excited to bring that to this panel.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. So I'm Nieves Velez de Mendizabal. You can recognize my name because it's the longest one. I'm currently leading the Pharmacometrics group in Eli Lilly. And yeah, right now we're doing a lot of efforts in terms of AI and automation and combination the two of them. In the past, we did these kind of panel discussions before, but the context was very different, no? And I wanted to start saying that I really think that all of us working in clinical pharmacology and pharmacometrics, we are really, really privileged, because although at some point in our career we made decisions that we thought that they were like very risky and very important decisions, if you think about it, they were not. I mean, even if you decide to stay in academia, if you decide to go to industry, regulatory agencies or consulting, there is not real risk, because actually all of us, we are quite happy with our job. We feel very proud of our job, our role. So it wasn't really a risky decision. So I am always saying that, my advice is always like, follow your passion, follow your joy, do whatever, makes you happy. And then the rest is going to be fine. The problem is that this privilege about choosing, I don't know if it's going to be a reality in a few years. So this is actually my very first question. Do you think that in a few years, I know that it's more or less okay, but in a few years we are going to still have the privilege to choose what we want to do, or we'll have to do whatever, we need to do in order to get some income. So thank you.
Before we jump into that question, I didn't know if we wanted to give the panelists a chance to introduce themselves briefly.
Very important. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, you want to start, Sam?
Sure. So I'm Rob Bies. I'm a pharmacometrician, clinical pharmacologist, and faculty at the University of Buffalo.
Hi, my name is Tomoyuki Mizuno. I am a clinical pharmacologist and associate professor at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. And my research focuses on the clinical implementation of the model-informed population dosing, where we utilize various modeling techniques, including POP-PK-PD, PBPK, and QSP, and machine learning.
Cool.
My name is Gemma Dickinson, and I lead the Global PK/PD and Pharmacometrics organization at Lilly, here in Indy.
Hi, I'm Sam Callisto. I am a pharmacometrician working at Metrum Research Group.
Okay, so who wants to start with the first question? Okay, Gemma, or you're just moving your...
Well, yeah, no, I was just like flicking my hair, but because I was just going to clarify, I was just going to remind your question, which was basically, will we still have jobs in a few years as clinical pharmacologists? The
privilege to choose to do what we want to do or what we have to do.
My thoughts on that are relatively hopeful, I would say, or optimistic, but also realistic. And I think realistically, at least in the pharmaceutical industry, and I can't speak for the other areas, but in the pharmaceutical industry, I think that the jobs as we know them today will not exist. I think we can say that with relative certainty. But what I do believe, somewhat optimistically, is that there will still be a place for scientists in the pharmaceutical industry, and there will absolutely be a place for quantitative scientists and quantitative thinking in the pharmaceutical industry. So I think we can, if what you love is quantitative sciences, then I think you'll still be able to choose a career path that allows you to do that.
And actually, I would echo that. Of course, we moving forward, we have a great deal of uncertainty. We don't know what next tool might arise or what next development might come out of this sort of current evolution. I think it's an exciting time because things are changing rapidly, and I think the key is adaptation and understanding what we're delivering. So from an academic perspective, how do we equip people to actually navigate these new waters? How much foundational knowledge versus functional knowledge of how to use these tools to leverage their abilities? And that's something that actually we're struggling with at the institution currently, but I think it's moving generally in a positive direction.
Yeah, in terms of our fields, which is academia and also clinical settings, I think quantitative scientist is still needed, and we have many opportunities and also need to do to answer the many questions from clinicians to help patients. I agree that the current emerging technologies may change our job, but I think we're going to have more power, or we have more capacity to provide more useful or helpful stuffs to the actually usable for the clinicians or many other people.
And I like to think about AI in the context of how it compares to the internet, right? Like when the internet came out, people were kind of doom and gloom, everything's going to change. But it's just a tool. This is another tool, and we need to learn how to use it, but we also need to understand what the limits of it are. At the current time, or at the current place of technology that there is right now, I don't know many people who would feel comfortable offloading multi-million-dollar decisions to an AI without any sort of human in the loop. And so I think that that's likely not going to change in the immediate future. And it really depends on what the technology, how much the technology is able to advance in the future, how much responsibility we're going to give to it.
It's kind of funny how, in general, maybe Gemma did, maybe Rob a little bit, but how in general you didn't really answer my question. I was asking about if you think that in the future we are going to be able to choose or not to choose the job that we want to do. But it's okay, because at the same time, I just want to, I fully agree. By the way, full disclosure, Gemma is my boss. Yes, full disclosure. And I totally agree with her that, clinical pharmacology is quantitative. And actually, I posted this yesterday on LinkedIn. But yeah, so Sam, you can ask the next question. Sorry.
If I may just take a step, I would say that we probably could still choose, but the choices are going to look a lot different. How about that? And I'm not going to try to predict what those exactly are going to look like.
Yeah, so the next question that we've got, I think, was originally focused primarily in the industry space, but I'd be open to hearing from the academia space as well to see what you guys' thoughts are. In your opinion, what is the most dangerous lie being told about AI right now? And that can be specific to the field or more broadly, but I imagine specific to the field would probably be more interesting to everybody.
If I flick my hair, it means I want to go first. I saw Nieves post that question on LinkedIn, so I had a bit of a head start in thinking about that one. And I don't know that it's a lie, but there's a very common thing that people say about AI that I think is a misnomer or an untruth. And it's when people say that it doesn't work, or it doesn't do this, or it makes mistakes, or it does X, Y, Z. And the reason that's an untruth is because it's changing so fast, like on a day-to-day basis. If you say it doesn't work, then you could be wrong by like next week or next month or whatever. And if you look on an even longer time frame than that, like a year, a couple of years, we really have no idea. It could be able to do things that we can't even dream of right now. And so whenever I hear that, I always I'm a little bit suspicious.
I would like to say the name itself is the most dangerous lie. artificial intelligence. There's really no intelligence here. This is merely a text prediction algorithm. It's telling you what it thinks the next word in the sentence is going to be, the next word in the line of code that it is writing for you. There's no intelligence here. It shouldn't be making decisions because it's not equipped to do so at the architectural level.
Okay, well, just one sec. What is your definition of being intelligence then? Because this is the way that the brain works. But okay, so speechless?
It is different from, well, okay, so I'm not going to answer your question. I'm going to sidestep it. The way, they call these neural nets, and that gives the illusion that they are the same as the brain. These are real neurons. It's a miniature version of our own brain, but that's absolutely false. It's not even a close approximation. And so I think because of that, there's this belief that it is thinking and it is feeling. I don't believe that is the case, and I would say that
Today.
it is not. Yes, no, you're absolutely right. I'm speaking purely of the current level of technology. There will likely be leaps and bounds where these are going to greatly improve, but at this point in time, you can't replace a person with an LLM.
Today.
Well,
But
although there have been significant reductions in medical writing departments, and those people are all being replaced by LLMs.
So just one clarification. In general, we define an intelligent being when you are self-conscious about your existence. So you are aware that you exist and you are aware that you can die. So I don't know if at some point AI is going to be, aware that it exists. But yeah, okay. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if this is most dangerous lie, but I think that most dangerous lie is AI knows everything. But I think no one believes that anymore. So one of the very high expectations of AI I recently heard is AI can replace the actual clinical trial in the next few years. And I think that's also impossible. But I heard this story from Lian Zhao from UCSF last week at the QSP conference in Leiden. I think he will join later this week in this meeting. But he recently attended, he told me that story that he recently attended the panel discussions with AI scientists in Bay Area from the AI tech companies. And all panelists except him, one of the question was if the AI can replace the actual clinical trial, and then other panelists say yes in the next few years. But so he said he was the only one. He said no, it's impossible. So I think there are very high expectation about the AI can replace everything. But in reality there are many challenges to do that.
Can I add something to that? Because I think it's interesting that for many years we've been talking about the possibility of models replacing clinical trials, like QSP models or PBPK models or whatever, Pharmacometrics models. And people have been very uncomfortable, except for modelers, people have been very uncomfortable with that idea. Certainly a lot of people that I know in my company, not in Pharmacometrics, obviously. But something's happened with AI where people are all of a sudden very happy to say, oh, AI can replace a clinical trial. But I think there's also something else that's happening kind of at the same time as that, which is the two ideas are becoming very conflated with each other, and people are using the terms interchangeably. So I'd actually be quite annoyed because of all the hype around AI that we never benefited from as modelers, as MIDD was growing. But also kind of excited that all of a sudden people are willing to accept the idea of something that you do with computers that some people don't really understand, replacing clinical trials.
And I think we can't forget the regulatory overlay that may actually slow the transition if that is to happen. But And if it is, how wrong does it need to be for the consequences to show up when something gets used widely? And that might be the feedback loop that needs to happen.
It's a very good point. At the same time, I also think that it will depend on the administration of the FDA, but this is another discussion. But yeah.
So this next question, and apologies, Nieves, I'm going a little bit off script with this one.
Oh, yeah.
This kind of builds on the intelligence piece that you had mentioned, Sam, and the consciousness piece that you had mentioned, Nieves. So I often struggle with the idea of how are we as humans going to be equipped to evaluate whether these models are conscious, right? I'm more concerned about us reaching a point where they are so good that we can't tell, and we have no way to be able to evaluate that. And so I guess the question that I've got for you guys is, what would your thoughts be on how we might go about trying to understand or evaluate that based on what little understanding we have of our own consciousness?
Oh my goodness, this is
Wow.
this is going. This reminds me are we living in a simulation that the simulation is so different? No. Okay, go for it. I'm fine. Yeah, go for it.
And try and tie it to career development somehow?
We'll come back after that question, I promise. That one's just been burning in my head for a while.
Yeah, Robert.
Oh, wow. Now that's, what does it mean to be conscious? And how would we know? And how would we know? I mean, that's a question for somebody who's much better at Zen, sort of Buddhism maybe, where they spend a lot of time thinking about consciousness and introspection. I'm really not equipped to maybe address that.
Do we have any neurologists in the audience, or maybe psychiatrists, or somebody knows? You, Amparo?
I was going to say that this discussion greatly reminds me of one of my favorite Isaac Asimov stories, which is called The Last Question, where they start asking question to what is first a computer, and it becomes evolved. And I won't tell you got to read it. I won't tell the ending, but we're heading in that direction, I think.
Anybody else?
I don't know, maybe if we call the AI HAL 2000.
Yes.
Okay,
so now another question. This question is... Sorry.
I have a thought. But, I mean, we're kind of talking about science fiction, right? To some degree. And I think that really paints the image of what's possible with these popular culture representations of AI, HAL 2000, Asimov, all of these types of things are giving us ideas for how things might look in the future, but these are fiction for now, today.
No, you can. You can say it's fiction permanently, I think.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to add that.
No, thank you, Sam. And I'm sorry that I didn't give you enough space to answer, so I will improve my skills moderating this panel discussion. I will ask Claude, but it's okay. So another question, this one is quite different, and actually this is quite closer to me, and it's about identity, in the sense that, my background is in computer science, so actually my technical skills, coding, generating figures, table simulations, models, blah, blah, I was very, very good, no? And actually my technical skills, they were the ones that actually I have the career that I have right now, thanks to those technical skills. And now it looks like those technical skills, that in theory is for smart people, is the very first thing that actually the AI has replaced. So how do you, I don't know, this creates kind of like an identity problem, no? Because you think that you are a technical expert, and suddenly somebody is automating the process with a computer, so what now? I mean, I wasted my last 20 years, or what? Please tell me.
Well, so I'm going to sort of be a bit oblique in the response. While the technical components are largely being automated, at least currently, at least until next week perhaps, it seems that there still needs to be a human in the loop. And that human in the loop to make evaluations of the output has to have a very high level expertise, especially as the AI gets better and better in terms of nuanced errors. No, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just, I'm going to direct you in the direction that I want.
So not 90 degrees to the question, maybe 30 degrees or something?
Yeah, I mean, I still have a job, so I'm fine. But I'm talking about, at some point, maybe we don't need a human in the loop, or maybe you just need one human, and so...
Well, and actually that's sort of where I was heading, but in a very circuitous or whatever tangential way. There's an aspect of if there is going to continue to be a need for the evaluation of the output, and that, where is that going to come from when you need years, and you need to be very, very good at something and have years of experience to develop that expertise, almost a level of wisdom in terms of being able to assess the kinds of outputs, especially as they get better. And how many of those people are you going to need? And then what is the role of the university? Is there going to be one university that teaches foundational skill and everybody else is learning how to leverage these tools? I don't have the answer.
No, nobody does.
I think we're already seeing it in terms of curriculum and how students are being tested. There's this return to blue books and oral exams because professors know if you give someone a take-home exam that they can very easily grab AI. So I'm actually lecturing on PK/PD models next week, and the professor asked me to write a couple exam questions. And the first thing I said was, will this be in-class closed book or take-home? Because that's going to vastly change the type of question I'm going to ask. And he said it's in-class closed book. So that the students are actually learning these concepts and forced to memorize stuff. There's always going to be a place in education for memorization and knowing these things. And, I like Rob's answer because it's really, we do need experts who are able to look at these outputs and understand where nuanced errors may have been introduced and what assumptions are implicitly being made, because that's really the whole output is contingent upon the underlying assumptions.
Let me clarify, experts in what? Because, for example, in my case, I'm an expert in coding, programming. So, and now, actually, Claude is able to do QC of my code much better than an expert in coding. So, but if we are talking about different kind of expertise, like, for example, I really think that my biggest value is not because the way that I code is the way that I think, and because I have the modeler mind. But everything depends on the expertise. But right now, the expertise that is replaced by AI right now is coding. So what about?
Gemma, you had a...
I can't really remember what the question was exactly, but I would like to say that something I've always believed, even before Claude came into my life, was that the value of a PhD was not necessarily in the technique that you learn while you're doing it or the skill that you pick up. It was about the thinking process that you learn and that kind of the learning cycle mentality where you see a problem, you figure out a way to solve it, you generate the data that enables you to solve it, you interpret that data, and then you figure out what that means. That's the greatest value of a PhD. Also, lots of other things like resilience and grit and, how to not lose the will to live. But
I love this answer. Yeah.
I think that that's what I think now Claude does exist, that becomes so much more important, because I think for a long time, or maybe for a little while, we might have got a little bit lazy as scientists in that we were able to differentiate ourselves and market ourselves and identify ourselves by just the skill set. But that's not what makes a scientist. Like an ability to run an experiment or write some code doesn't make a scientist. It's the thinking process that makes a scientist. And so we have to go back to our roots. We have to learn to do that well, do that exceptionally well, because that's what AI cannot do today. Maybe it will be able to do in the future, but I think we have a much longer period of job security that we can build on that thinking process and the creativity that comes from that.
I think, yeah, I agree that AI can replace part of our job, and because we don't have to write a code from the scratch anymore. I think the necessary expertise now is the integration, because I think AI is good at do some specific job if we specify correctly the context of use. But still, I think AI is not good at integrating the all piece of the information, and still a human needs to integrate and show the directions and decide how we utilize those informations AI provided us.
And I was just going to say, I can't agree with you more, Gemma. And I would hope that at least there are some doctoral programs that still strive to not produce technicians, but there are a lot that actually where, I need to learn this and I need to learn this so that I can market myself. And I think that's really counterproductive. But it's also really terrifying when you hold someone's feet to the fire, so to speak, and you demand that they actually address a question. And people, there's maybe not quite as much, I've noticed maybe a reduction in resilience, or I'm just getting old and insensitive, but a reduction in resilience in terms of being able to manage those kinds of experiences that I think are critical to forming your ability to evaluate a problem and come up with exactly the sequence of approaches. And that, I think that addresses exactly what you're saying. It's not that you can, yes, you can code, but you code it, your expertise is that qualitative logical framework that has to be there first so that you can actually test something and you have something interpretable, and then you refine it. And maybe you ask Claude to, do some of that refinement, but that first piece is probably the most difficult.
Thank you. Sam, anything else? Sam the first, by the way.
Always.
This
Yeah.
is Sam the first, and the other one is Sam the second.
I also want to just touch on soft skills and communication and how important it is for scientists, especially all of the trainees here. This is your time to really hone your presentation skills, use it, make it good. Nieves mentioned earlier that she was surprised that she had not seen any obviously fully Gemini-generated, Claude-generated slide decks so far today, or for this week. And that really says something, that we can easily tell the difference between something that a human put together and put thought behind versus something that was just generated using an AI. A clear story about your science is the only way that you are going to be adding value to an organization, to the scientific research empire, all of the above. It's really important to be able to communicate, and if you're offloading your communication part to AI, you're doing a disservice to yourself.
So just 2 comments. I mean, it's very clear to me that actually the future, it really depends on academia, and you guys, you need to form like very resilient PhDs, and you have to teach them how to think. And this is the only way. And the other thing, Sam, it's not because of the content, also sometimes it's also the content. Actually, we call it cloud vomit. But it's also how it looks like. So a lot of times we are able to recognize because of the kind of the setup, the colors, the way, and the slash, but yeah.
Loss of individuality.
Today.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't know if you tried, but Notebook LM is incredible to do infographics and.
And podcasts.
And podcasts, yeah. And even presentations now. Too bad that we don't have that in Lilly. But Sam?
Yeah, so leaning more into the academic space, the next question we've got is yes or no. Do you think that pharmacometrician will be a recognized job title in 2035, and explain why or why not?
Maybe a different name?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. We may use the different name, but we still have a function as a pharmacometrician. So we need, yes, someone expert, understand, and also that direct the quantitative computational modeling. Or I even think that, yeah, maybe the role of pharmacometrician even more important than today, because we have more powerful computational tool available so we can answer more complex or unpredictable questions right now in the future.
This answer, please remember this answer, because this is perfect for the last question that we have. But I'm not going to disclose right now. But yeah, remember this answer. Anybody else?
Well, I'm going to say no, but actually I agree with my colleague here, because I think it's that I agree with you that I think the role will become more important, because I still believe very strongly that model-informed discovery and development is the future. AI is a massive enabler to that, and it's an enabler computationally and in terms of what we can do, but it's also, like I talked about before, like the psychological aspects of it, like people, just non-modelers are becoming a lot more comfortable with the concepts, and so that should accelerate the uptake of MIDD, I think. But another thing that I think is going to happen is that AI will enable people with a modeling mindset to access a wider variety of skill sets. So we won't have a need for such narrow niche scientific roles anymore, like advanced analytics, statistics, pharmacometrics, QSP, PBPK people, we'll be able to have one person that has a quantitative mindset and an understanding of all those different areas and can act as kind of a central person that accesses all of those. So I think, no, there won't be a pharmacometrician in the future, but there'll be like a quantitative scientist that makes decisions on portfolio project teams in the industry. So this is as far as the industry goes.
From an academic perspective, I hesitate to make the prediction, but I concur with Gemma in terms of there may not be the same, sort of narrow title, but there'll be some evolved role that we take up. And what exactly that looks like, we will know when we get there, I guess.
But Rob, seriously, you have to make a guess.
So as a job title, I would say no. But as a role of a sort of quantitative facilitator, I think that whenever that's going to be called, maybe that'll be called a pharmacometrician still. I don't know, but
I don't know. I really think that the name is perfect, yes. But at the same time, it's true that maybe we need a different name because we are entering a different era. So
perhaps
I like quantitative facilitator. Kind of.
Oh yes.
So Gemma, kind of building off of the point that you had made about...
Wait, Sam, he wanted to say.
No, it's
Sam,
okay. You can
Sam.
skip me. I was going to say the same thing as everyone else, so go ahead to the next one.
Okay. So building off of the statement that you had made about how AI is sort of democratizing this ability to do this kind of work, as it makes things much easier to run more sophisticated models, does that raise the floor for model quality or development, or does it create scientists that don't know what they don't know as they're building these?
Oh man, that I was just about to talk about that, so I'm glad I let you ask your question first. I mean, even not 2035, I'm talking about today. You have the ability to put together a PopPK model, regardless of your background. You could be a physician, you could be a clinical pharmacologist who has a pharmacometrician on their team that they just want to work around because they don't like working with them. You could be a statistician. I mean, this is the reality in a lot of organizations, that it's seen as a territory that is being taken, And so in terms of raising the floor, potentially, yes, but I think that's also where the risk comes in. If someone who doesn't really know in depth the assumptions underlying the methodology, there's potential for an incorrect model to be brought forward and have disastrous errors in terms of decisions that are being made downstream.
But it may actually take that happening for that correction to occur.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar actually. Like, I think that change that happens in society, especially like the magnitude of changes that we're talking about now, they never happen smoothly. Like, the right thing happens in the long run over a very long time frame and a big enough scale. But on a scale that we work on, like in Lilly or in our academic institution or in our CRO, it could go either way. We could be one of the ones that do it right. We could be one of the ones that do it wrong. We could have some massive failures that everybody else learns from, or we can be the ones that kind of lead the way and show what's possible. And I know which side of that I'd like to be on, but we know that it's a flip of the coin sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, giving an example about that, sometimes we just need to wait. And, you know, Anna, my previous boss, she used to tell me that, you know, I was very bad with analogies and examples, but you can tell me. But this reminds me, you know, when we started working with using Facebook, and I shared this example before, a lot of people, they were using Facebook as a diary. So they were saying a lot of things in public and sharing all the feelings and everything. And then over time, this was corrected because this overexposed obviously was a negative thing. No? So I think here is going to happen kind of like the same thing. So time, we'll see with time. I'm not going to make any prediction, but sorry, drop. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, so the next one I've got kind of builds off of what you had led on with, Sam. So as AI blurs the boundaries between different disciplines, should early career professionals still try and focus on specializing in clinical pharmacology or pharmacometrics, or should they try and put more focus into adjacent fields, maybe like bioinformatics or data science?
No. No, I think there's value to knowing something really well. I mean, we've talked about getting a PhD, and part of the PhD is making an impact, doing research in an entirely new area, doing something novel. And to do that requires a lot of expertise in what is currently possible and what has already been done. And so I think if you're trying to spread yourself too thin during your graduate training, that's just going to slow down your degree. In terms of early professional, because you did say early professional, it depends where you're at. You know, if you're in industry, people might get upset and tell you to stay in your lane. If you're in academia, maybe that would be beneficial. It really depends on what your goals are and where you want to go.
You know, I just something. You know, this gets back to what Gemma was saying about, you know, what should the focus be of an education, and you know, the topic is almost sort of peripheral to that. It's learning how to think, learning how to figure out how to answer a question, how to come up with a question in the first place. You know, and learn what you need to learn, and then figure out a way to answer it in a way that's interpretable. And it's, you know, that's the last thing that students generally learn, and some of them never quite get there. So whether it's, you know, this is going to be an extreme example, whether it's an English degree or a pharmaceutical sciences PhD, you should be equipped. And there are examples where, you know, thesis defenses could, you know, for example, I did my doctoral degree at Georgetown, and they said, well, somebody could come from any department. You're doing a PhD in pharmacology, but somebody could be there from classics and ask you about the Homeric poems. And the point is, you would need to know how to address what somebody raised in a coherent way. And they know you're not a topic expert on that. So anyway, these are some of the, you know, I think, you know, and that's maybe a little bit, we're getting to the Platonic realm. It's an extreme abstraction, but, you know, But at least keeping that in mind, you know.
No, I think, yeah, I also agree. And I think for the, in similar to NAM, AI in this research or with using those advanced modeling, the context of use is very important. And so the training during PhD in clinical pharmacology or pharmacometrics really give us the opportunities to think about what is the problems to solve and where we should apply those the data science or the quantitative modeling approach to that. And I think those backgrounds make us the very unique positions compared to the data scientists from the bioinformatics or other discipline.
Yeah, and I guess I'd just add one last thing, which is that the beauty of kind of the scientific method and scientific thinking is that it's the same whether you're working on like a very, very micro scale, like you've gone very, very deep in your technical area, or you're thinking broadly about how to impact changes that impact multiple disciplines. And so, yeah, I think it just goes back to that idea that when you're choosing what to work on, whether it's in your PhD or your undergraduate degree or when you in your first job, there's no right or wrong way, like whether to go deep on the technical or to think broadly. It's more just about what you're passionate enough about to exercise that that mindset and think about things that will allow you to have the impact that will contribute to your career development.
Yeah, and just to add one thing, I think you need multiple backgrounds in your team. So just one discipline is not work good enough. So I think the different background needs to bring together to solve the problems.
No, thank you. Another question is that, for example, with your kids, or for example, with a brilliant 20-something-year-old kid, do you really recommend this person to do a PhD in clinical pharmacology and pharmacometrics, or do you think that maybe it's better for them to do a PhD in something that requires more like a physical presence, like something in the lab, for example?
Well, I don't have kids, and one of the reasons I don't is because I never wanted to have to worry about how they were going to do in the future, and I don't know. I mean, I think about my nieces and nephews, and I think there are certain things that are obvious safe bets right now, and they're more like the vocational areas and like manual stuff. Yes. But at the same time, I think like it's not like there's going to be an absence of needs for scientists in the future and people that can think and kind of tackle problems. So I don't know. I don't know if I would try and second guess that really if I did have children.
But, you know, like my step kids, they are telling me, I mean, like a real scientist, because, you know, I'm not a real scientist because, you know, I don't work in a lab and I don't have a white coat, but this is, for example, yeah, so I think PhDs, they are still okay because, like you said, you know, it's for us to learn how to think and to survive, but do you think that maybe it's better to pursue something that is more, something that requires your physical presence, like I said, with
well, what if everyone does that though, and then we don't have any?
I know.
Yeah.
I would also like to ask of the people at this table, or everyone on stage actually, who did their PhD in pharmacometrics?
I mean, me, not systems biology, close enough.
I don't know.
But
I don't have a PhD, so.
My point is that people come to this field with various background trainings, and does the field that you get your PhD in really matter that much? If you're going to become a pharmacometrician, you don't need to have a PhD in pharmacometrics.
No, but the other way around, you need. I mean, if you are going to come to Lilly and work in the lab, you need experience in the lab. So I'm telling you that I'm not getting a job in in the lab if I don't have any experience in the lab, no? The other way around, maybe it's more flexible because actually pharmacometrics is like the combination of different fields, no? And there is overlap from different fields, but.
I think you're focusing too much on like specific skills. I mean, if someone with a PhD in English, this is a very extreme example, but wanted to get into research, they could get a second PhD, or they could find someone willing to take a swing and they could do a postdoc, get some postdoctoral training in a wet lab, and then they would be able to get a job at Lilly in the wet lab.
And paying debt, student debt until they are 50 years old, but yeah, everything is possible, yeah.
And then for the vocational components, maybe, there'll be the Tesla robot therapy, physical therapist and the nurse and the things like that. So that may kind of, although there've been robotic surgery for quite some time, and it seems surgeons are still in good shape.
Yeah, but this is an honest question, and like you, Gemma, I don't have kids, but I have stepkids and I have nephews and nieces, and for example, here in the US, as you know, going to college is quite expensive. So, and now, in the past, if you go to college and you get your degree, you can get the job. Now, I don't think in the future, I don't think it's going to be warranted. And on the top of that, you are going to have some debt. So, I don't know, it's better to be, like a plumber. Speechless?
I think if you want to be, and I think it's dangerous to try and model your life choices on what might be in the future rather than what you're passionate about and what you love doing. So I think within a realm, there might be variations on a theme, like do you want to do a lab-based PhD or a computer-based, and what opportunities might that open up in the future? But if it's a choice between being like a dancer or a scientist, then that's not probably a real choice. Like you should just do what you're like suited for mentally and physically, and that you can find joy in.
Perfect. I love the answer.
I also agree. I think that depends on, up to them, what they want to do, what they are passionate. And I still think that, if the people is interested in applying those approach for something like clinical or the drug development, I can recommend Pharmacometrics as a PhD. And maybe the job is maybe competitive in the future, but still, I think this is a very powerful and valuable job, I think.
I think that's, those are all very, very valid points. What I think, for example, the example with the dancer, or let's say a musician, you need to perhaps be realistic about, your opportunities, and just make peace with that if that's really what you want to pursue. Or because and I think the current environment has unsettled those sort of degree trajectories that might give you some guaranteed base income, and then you could have your hobby, if that was if that was the case. But I think each answer has to come from each individual's sense of themselves and sense of what they want to do. So.
No, I love these answers, and actually this loop with my very first question, saying that we are privileged because in the past, in our case, we chose our career and we chose our passion, we chose our joy, the things that we enjoy and the things that we are capable to do. And I really think that, I know that there is a lot of uncertainty, but still I really think that the new generations, they should do the same, follow your heart, follow your passion, no? And everything's going to be fine. But I don't know, maybe I'm too naive. Sam, next question, or I have one more question, but I want to be the last. So
yeah, I was gonna say, we've still got a little bit of time.
We have 8 more minutes. But no, for the questions, then we have open discussion. With,
okay. I didn't know we were going for 30 minutes for that. Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, I'll do one last one, and then we can jump into the closing question. So when we're talking about hiring and we're talking about what AI skills that people are going to be needing or the value that brings, are you guys really truly screening for AI skills when you're doing the hiring right now? And so I guess this one's more industry focused than anything, but I'd love to get the academic perspective as well. And then what does that look like, right? Like how are you performing that screening and doing that verification of what skills are available?
Everybody looking at Gemma.
Well, so to a certain extent, it depends what role you're hiring for. Because I, for example, have an open position right now for a digital and AI strategy lead for a PKPD. Apply if you're interested. And for that, obviously, I want them to have some solid background in the application of AI in our field. But for a usual kind of a role in PKPD and pharmacometrics, I'm not looking for like any sort of AI skill specifically, I think, in the screening. But what I'm looking for is what I've always looked for, which is consistent, which is that you look for people that are adaptable and flexible and keep up to date with their experiences and the tools that they use. And so I guess that's a very simple answer. That's what I would look for. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's same to me as well. So I don't specifically look for the any AI skills. I just ask them what kind of AI tool you are using, but just it's one of the general conversation. And also I'm curious if there are any new tools. I always ask, maybe I ask that if they have they have a skills in understanding, modeling, and also the code, or if they have some capacity to apply machine learning for our own research rather than using AI skills for the general purpose. And also, as Sam mentioned, that I think communication skill is more important than the AI skill using.
I don't directly look at AI skills, but I think adaptable, competent, up to date, and also a little bit hungry. Energetic, enthusiastic, a little bit hungry. They not complacent. So.
Yeah, I'm not personally a hiring manager, but I would say if I were hiring someone, I would just want to see curiosity and kind of a realistic understanding of the limits of the current technology and an understanding of responsibility and accountability. You can't just say, well, the AI wrote this code for me. I don't understand how it works, but it does what I want it to do. That's a red flag for me.
Interesting. Actually, I have a follow-up question, mainly for you two in academia. If somebody is using AI and large language models to, increase efficiency of their work, is something that you think that is something like positive or is something negative for you guys?
It's positive for me because I also use a lot for the AI tool. The people need to understand what you can upload and what you cannot, and how to utilize the model. So I think in terms of the people are aware of the security and also some of those concerns. I'm very positive about that.
I'm generally positive about it as well, as long as they're open about it, and they're ultimately responsible for whatever they produce. Whether it comes from a large language model, but something that we're really wrestling with is, I'm on the committee that's trying to write the policies for AI use at the university in terms of capstone and thesis and dissertation projects, and that's not a trivial thing to put together. And there are many sort of factions in terms of, or factions of too strong a word, perspectives, competing perspectives that have very different sort of views, sort of purist, no, absolutely prohibit versus facilitate. So,
I mean, I'm very happy to hear your answers. I really think that, you say something very important. I think people, they need to be transparent and disclose that they are using AI. And also, like you said, accountability. So then you cannot blame ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. So I have one more questions before we start the questions with you guys. The other day I was reading something on LinkedIn that actually made me stop and to think. So I don't know, people that they are older, they remember like I do. There was a company that it was called Kodak that it was for photography, no? And actually in this company, for decades, they spent a lot of resources trying to develop the best film. You know, they got like the best engineers and they were, you know, developing the best film for having like the best color, the best resolution, the best everything for your pictures, your photos, no? But the funny thing is that actually somebody in this company, they invented also the digital camera in 1975, but they decided to bury the digital camera and said, you know, this is too dangerous because, you know, we spend so much time making like the perfect film that, you know, we are not going to risk it. So actually they buried the camera. And then, you know what happened. So nobody is taking these kind of pictures anymore. Kind of like a similar example we have, for example, with Nokia. Nokia was trying to do like the smallest phone in the world, and they completely missed the smartphone wave, no? So the other day I was thinking here in Lilly, something that we spent a lot of energy in the last year is try to use automation and AI to make us faster, more efficient, so we can have more time to think, and we can execute faster. So it's like basically we are making like a better film, and we are spending a lot of resources and a lot of effort to make a better film. So my question is that maybe in pharmacometrics, I'm talking about pharmacometrics because, you know, I'm pharmacometrician. Maybe in pharmacometrics, are we maybe missing the digital camera? You think that we are?
Yeah, and that's why there's multiple arms to our strategy, Nieves, where one arm is to automate and make faster and more efficient the things that we're doing, that we already do. But there's another arm to the strategy, which is figure out what we need to do differently. And a big part of that is data foundations and access to the vast data sets that we own as a pharmaceutical company, and then the use of AI to analyze those and maybe think about what comes after pharmacometrics. But you and I don't talk about that too much because it's kind of sensitive.
Yeah. No, I agree entirely. Diversification of perspectives, but then it's also sometimes hard to realize what that threat is. Like maybe they realize the threat, but at least we have the Eastman School of Music in Rochester left over, so that's a very nice thing. But no, it's, you know, sometimes you don't realize what that, you know, what that's going to be, or what other sort of shocks are going to arrive that will change a perspective or whatever drastically. So I said, yeah. So hopefully, one of the diverse sort of paths is one of the opportunities that persists.
Yeah, I mean, I always have the same feeling. I'm not going to lie. Like, could the future be something completely different to what we're doing and what we've like basically dedicated our careers to? But I hope not, and I think we've got a good chance of being part of the future rather than made redundant by the future. And I'm excited about that possibility, and I want to keep working towards what I think the future should look like, or we think the future should look like. And because if you believe in something, which is for me is MIDD, then you can work according to your passion, what you're passionate about and what brings you joy, and hopefully the right thing happens over a long enough period of time. It's just a question of whether that right thing is what I think is the right thing, or what is maybe something different, but I believe in that, and so that's what I think we have to work towards.
I think that there's always going to be a place for quantitative scientists in the realm of drug development. I don't know if pharmacometrician is going to be the title in the future, but I think there's always going to be a place for the skills which we've developed. In terms of, are we missing this quantum leap? Who knows what that's going to be? But I would think that it is going to come from the quantitative realm, and it's going to be something that we're going to have to adapt and learn how to do. But again, we talked about the benefit or goal of a PhD is learning how to learn. And so if we're coming in with a solid foundation, understanding the current state and the current technologies and methodologies, that we're going to be well equipped to move forward and employ whatever is the gold standard in the future.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to predict the future, but I also agree with Gemma that it's all depending on how to utilize those tools. And for example, I think the AI can be very helpful to facilitate communication. And as a non-native English speaker, I also use AI a lot, and that is very helpful to communicate in terms of writing right now. In the future, maybe in speaking as well. But I think that using AI may provide us some very nice things, but maybe also may direct some not good direction. But we just need to think, because I think in order to make the right direction, I think it would be nice to communicate each other and discuss. I think this is a good opportunity to share what we are thinking, and we can see which direction we should go.
To just sort of add my own personal take, Gemma, I really liked when you had mentioned the data piece of it, right? So in my mind, the digital camera is already here. We all already see it. It's AI and machine learning. It's just being able to leverage the data effectively to make these new decisions and to push the boundary for what modeling and simulation traditionally was for so long. And that's honestly the biggest challenge. That's been the biggest challenge in modeling and simulation, and then obviously AI and machine learning from the very beginning. So I think solving those data problems will essentially charge our digital camera. But that's my opinion.
So Dennis, it's a very interesting thought, because machine learning, the digital camera, is older than the film. So it's kind of interesting that 50 or 60 or even more.
70. General camera was 65, 1965, 60.
Years later, we are going back to, but yeah.
But actually, the first computer simulations were the first computers were trying to reflect the evolution.
Yes,
which
yes.
are so that was the 50s.
Yeah, and actually in artificial intelligence, all the algorithms, they are always, inspired in nature, no?
Well, and Arthur Guyton's model was created on an analog computer initially. The detailed model of renal physiology, cardiovascular physiology.
Yeah, but now that, it's true that now that we have the computing and we have the data, now it's possible. Yeah. So, okay, so we have some questions. We have some time for questions. Please don't be shy. I know that we are very, very tired, but just bear with us.
Thank you. This is Rajaram from University at Buffalo. So I'll be graduating next month. So for me personally, I felt this discussion was like a courtroom trial, where the case is whether I'm guilty or not for choosing to be a pharmacometrician. And thank you. You made me feel I'm not guilty yet. So it was, thank you very much. I have a couple of questions. So we all know that we are hearing that AI is taking job from people. Like we might lose job because of AI. But I'm curious to know how much AI have improved the drug development process. Like after replacing human with AI, how much of, did you significantly see any improvement in drug development?
So I think the success of drug development depends on the quality of the decisions that you make. And AI is not yet making those decisions, but what it does do is allow us to get to more decisions more quickly. So I don't think that reflects the quality necessarily, but it just reflects how much we're able to do. And that's what's important for a company like Lilly. I mean, I think the general feeling of our highest leadership is that AI won't reduce the number of jobs, it will just change what those jobs are. And so there'll be some areas that we don't have anymore and some areas where we increase and do things differently. So I think right now we're in the phase where we're focused on the automation part and getting faster. I think to the point that Sam won?
You Sam 2, I'm Sam.
Oh, Sam 2, sorry. Sam 2 made earlier. I think we're on the cusp of where machine learning really changes the quality of those decisions, particularly initially in the discovery space, I think, but probably with development not being far behind that. So it's more to come, I think.
Thank you. My next question is, whenever I feel discouraged about this AI affecting my job or something, I have two philosophies. I just want to know how wrong or how right I am with these two philosophies. The first philosophy is I always believe in this world, like having a great question is far more better than having a great answer, because answer is everywhere. But if you have a great question, like you will be valued anywhere you go. And my second philosophy is like, yeah, if you take back and look at the history, year by year, the number of medical condition and number of diseases is the graph is going up. We are fortunate to like invent new ways to manage those conditions, but the graph is always up. So I always believe that as long as the graph is going up, we have a space in this field. It may be ethically very wrong, but these are the two philosophies. I just want to know how wrong or how right I am with these two philosophies.
I mean, I like your discussion of the increase of diagnoses and different types of diagnoses, right? And I think that is a function of basic research. And at the end of the day, like what we're doing is taking basic research and translating it and trying to monetize it. And there's still a lot to be learned about how the body works. I am a bit of a brain nerd myself, and there's so much unknown about the brain, and there's so many dead ends in medical research in the neuroscience space because of the lack of reliable biomarkers. So I think there's going to be more breakthroughs at the basic science level that are going to inform how we can treat all of these diseases in the future.
Thank you.
All right, I'm Artem Belyakov. I'm a postdoc fellow at Thomas Jefferson University. So first I'm going to begin personal experience. I'm applying for jobs. I'm finishing my fellowship up soon. I'm not seeing a lot of entry-level jobs. I'm seeing a lot of director-level jobs. And I've heard, at least in the computer science space, there's the growing concern that AI can automate entry-level job tasks. And so some people are saying, why would I hire entry-level if AI could do it for me? And there's this concern that you're running out of the pipeline of experts that 10 years from now, there's not going to be directors, there's not going to be VPs because they never were able to get a job in the first place. So I want to ask, one, is this happening in the context of clinical pharmacology and pharmacometrics? And if it is, how do we preserve that pipeline that we don't cannibalize our talent, starting out in their careers?
Are you applying for jobs in the pharmaceutical industry?
Yes, but I think also for academia as well, it could apply.
So I guess for the pharmaceutical industry, I mean, I can't speak for other companies, but I'm going to. So many companies in the pharmaceutical industry are not doing too well right now. And I think maybe what you're seeing might be a consequence of that rather than AI and machine learning. Just that when companies are not doing so well, they have few positions to fill. They're not allowed to open very many. And so when they are able to open them, they try and make them more experienced positions so that they can get a bit more bang for their buck, I suppose, or at least that's what they think. I think it's a little short-sighted thinking, but I do think that that's something that happens.
Yeah, I think I agree that AI may replace the entry-level job, but I think we also need to think about sustainability as an institution or society or field. I believe that company or even academia, we also need to train people, and someone needs to direct AI or that use AI, and you need to really understand the contents, the job, what you want AI to do. And I think the best way is you first need to do those jobs by yourself without using AI at the beginning, so that you can understand the details of the job or work, what you need to pay, where you need to pay attention, or otherwise you cannot review the work the AI did. So in order to maintain those sustainability, we still need to make those environment that people can still join as an entry level and then trained as the specialist like we do right now.
Thank you. I really like the word sustainability, really applying that. We need to think long-term, making sure these pathways still exist.
I just wanted to add, my vision for the future is the entry-level positions is not going to be at the bottom of the org chart anymore. There's going to be a layer below that's all AI. So as an individual contributor, you're going to have multiple AI agents who are working on things, and your job as an entry-level scientist is going to be reviewing those for accuracy, collating them, and giving them the questions to work on. So I don't think that there's going to be the bottom of the org chart is going to be chopped off. I think that we're just adding a layer of AI below what's currently there.
Working in pharmacometrics, I agree with Sam. Sam one.
Thank you.
So first, I want to validate what Gemma said. I coach a lot of entry-level folks that are going into their first careers, and that's pretty much the problem, is that if you have a company that has a limited number of spaces, they're going to want to bring somebody in who can hit the ground running. But a lot of the big pharmas, I would say, are good training grounds for entry-level folks. So I want to speak to something that Sam 2? Are you 2? Okay, sorry, Sam 2. The standing Sam said, which kind of click some things into places, and you talked about traditional pharmacometrics. There's no such thing. I mean, if you think about pharmacometrics as a field, the term pharmacometrician wasn't even really around until about 20 years ago. And I think about like when Rob and I were coming out of our postdocs, we were using, I had 2 core computers, and I had to go put my simulations on all 4 of the 2 core computers and then collect them and use the Access database to pull out my data. I mean, it was things have marched on, new tools come, and you see people freak out the same way that they freaked out when like SimSip came around and they started putting all of the parameter values and the models in there, and they say, oh, it's a black box, but people are using it. And when PSN came along and people started to automate a lot of the things that we used to do manually, people freaked out, it's going to stop us from thinking. But all we've done is we've evolved over time. So you evolve, the tools evolve, the computation evolves, we evolve to do that, to be able to just sort of manage that. I think AI is coming in now. It does more than I would say your average tool that automates things, but we're going to adapt along with it, just like we've adapted. So there is no such thing as traditional pharmacometrics. The pharmacometrics that I was doing coming right out of my postdoc is not the pharmacometrics that people are doing now. So not to beat up on you, but what that meant to me was, we're freaking out about AI, but what came out along the way is it's a tool, and it has to be used responsibly, and it has to be used by people. And I love what you said about you have to be able to do it without it. When we taught pharmacokinetics, we taught people how to do Laplace transforms and how to do non-compartmental analysis by hand, so that they could understand when they start to use the computer whether it's right or wrong. And so I think it is a tool. It does more than your average automation tool, but we have to adapt along with it. So I agree with all of you. Pharmacometrician is going to be around. It's going to look different, but what I see about these tools is that they take away some of the drudgery of the day-to-day work that we do, and allows us to think more and allows us to communicate more and allows us to be more strategic. So I think you're going to have to be a strategic drug development scientist who uses tools as opposed to somebody who uses tools to give to somebody else to be a strategic drug development scientist. So we really have to understand strategy and drug development and use whatever tools are at our disposal to be able to answer the questions that are at hand. Those questions aren't going away. Which dose, what's the right dose for the right patient? That dose isn't going away, or that question isn't going away. Plus, look at all the new modalities that are out there. Gene therapy and cell therapies, there's new modalities, there's new diseases. We have to evolve. And so, if you're fighting something that's inevitable, you won't be a pharmacometrician. But if you kind of take it by the hand and go along with it and embrace the fear, I think that's the right way forward. I don't know if that was more of a comment than a question, but happy to hear your thoughts on that.
This was perfect. The only problem is that I really wanted to have a discussion, and it looks like we agree on everything because I fully agree with Stacy. So, question.
Well, I wanted to sort of add my comments along the same line. When I started out, I won't say how many years ago, but I was drug metabolism. And now I am a precision medicine doctor. In the process, I'm still looking for how to be successful because there are so many things that are still out there. And one of the points I want to make is that I don't personally find that precision, basically it was the right drug, the right dose for the right person. Ain't no such thing. One of the things that has to come on with precision medicine and polygenetics medicine is modeling. And modeling is going to be a key aspect. AI is probably going to take over some of it, but it's got to clean up all the junk in the last 50 years of science that we've left behind. So that's one thing. Think about all the CNS stuff we're dealing with right now. They're all syndromes. Nobody knows what they are. So we've got a whole lot of work for mechanisms for anybody who's interested in QSP. These things are not going to be solved in the next 5 years. They're not going to be solved in the next 10 years. So all of you young people have a big lot of work to do in order to make up the mess that we've left behind. So that's one aspect of it. But the other aspect is that one of the key things is, I sit in here with all of you pharmacometricians and try to look like I understand everything that's going on. But I really need you guys to tell me what's going on. So one of the pieces of advice that I would give you is learn how to communicate what you found, because that's going to be absolutely key to taking a dumb physician like myself and telling him how to predict what his next patient ought to be receiving. And those confidence intervals you have now, they're not going to be nearly acceptable in the future. You're going to have to be able to refine your data and your outputs a lot more closely so they can be far more predictive. I think you've got a whole generation in front of you before you're in trouble.
Thank you. This is super, super useful. By the way, just one comment. I strongly believe that AI can be extremely useful for QSP modeling. So sometimes the problem with QSP, it requires a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of research. So you can really speed up the development of QSP models thanks to AI. Amparo?
This is not a comment, it's actually a question. So I'm very interested in the human aspect and the organizational aspect of this as somebody that's leading the AI in services at Simulations Plus. So like with any technology, there's early adopters, people that are really, really gung-ho into it. There's deniers that think it's like the worst thing ever and it's gonna kill us all. I am wondering, and it's something like in my vision, you have to be, we're in research mode right now. We're learning what it can do, what else it can do, but I don't think that can ever stop, right? So we need to keep going with that. So a couple of questions were, one, in your respective organizations, how are you approaching, the early adopters versus the deniers and trying to get everybody together? Or are you letting one group run with it and letting the other ones do the drudgery and keep going doing the same thing? How do we inspire those? And then are you having a dedicated core that is doing research and others that are doing implementation, or how are you handling it?
So at least at the University of Buffalo, it's somewhat multimodal. There are we've had situations where, I mean, my own view is we should really try to encourage as much as possible, but we've very rapidly had sort of relatively invisible administrative rules written. So somebody might try to think they're doing something really innovative, like taking lecture notes and putting them in Google LM to get a study guide, and then getting suspended for doing that. And well, wait a minute, they were trying to be innovative and they thought they were doing a great thing. Not, because we haven't had a chance to sort of educate that we shouldn't be uploading this, or it wasn't the Bulls AI, UB containerized system. So, I think there are sort of, and yet we have an Empire AI Institute that's being heavily funded by, Kathy Hochul, the state of New York. So we need, I think it's really counter, this is my political, or not political, my opinion statement, is that we should be encouraging people to be curious and try things. And if they do things that are a little bit on the edges, then it's an opportunity to educate and to figure out also what we need to do to facilitate our students and staff and faculty to be able to play and try these new tools without the fear that suddenly they're going to have some sort of a serious consequence. But I think you have, again, people looking at this with a great deal of fear at the same, and a great deal of sort of territoriality, I don't know, a territorial perspective, yeah, a territorial perspective. Well, I took a long time to generate that lecture, and now it's, but I'm not sure anybody could really retrieve that, but it's just perceptions.
So just a little comment, something that I experience is that it's a bimodal distribution and is correlated with the years of experience. And I don't need to disclose the direction. So Gemma?
So yeah, I think it's a huge change management problem. And I don't have the answers, but I do have some thoughts on what differentiates this change management problem from your average change management problem. Typically, we think of change management in some of the terms that you use, right? Like you have your early adopters, you have the people that take a while to come along board, and then you have people that will never come on board. That way of thinking doesn't work in this space because it's changing so quickly. And so where in the past you might have had your early adopters and then those people that would, take them a few months, maybe a year, that come along eventually, that's not going to work anymore because by the time they get there, you've moved away past that. And I think people are becoming very overwhelmed very quickly with how far behind they are if they weren't those early adopters. And so being kind of sensitive to that and figuring out an approach that helps them and helps them kind of catch up. Like I said, I don't really have the answers, but I do know that there's like a consequence of lack of change management here that is far greater than what we've experienced in the past as well. Because if people are not willing to embrace AI in our organizations, then they're going to be left behind in their personal lives as well. And so I think it makes it much more like we have a responsibility to help bring those people along because it will help them not just in their careers, but in their lives. And then the other part is the fear part, which you alluded to, because you said that there are those kind of detractors that think it's going to be the end of the world, but they're not detractors. Like they believe that AI is going to change things. It's just they have an enormously pessimistic or like maybe realistic view of the future. And that fear part is really, I think, impacting our ability to manage through this change. And like I said, I don't have the answer, but it's certainly a consideration. It's like there's so much emotion wrapped up in this more than your average change management problem.
Yeah, I also appreciate your comment because we have seen both early adapter and not early adapter. So in our hospital, we provide a model-informed patient dosing service for the clinicians in support of their individualized dosing, point of care dose optimizations. And now we provide physicians in the different various fields, including oncology or immune-mediated disease or infection disease or immunosuppressive agents, like Abby presented earlier today. And I think we have developed this concept step by step and started with the clinical champions who are willing to adapt our approach. And once we showed how it works, they start believe that and if they also start using our approach for their clinical practice. And once we have believers, they will talk about how our approach is helpful, and that will create another believers, and we can then disseminate, and we can create those believers step by step. So I think the same things can happen with AI. So once we start using and developed the capacity to support those people who need the better solutions or approach to answer their clinical problems, then we can slowly develop those new approach.
Thank you so much. I mean, I really want to congratulate Sam and myself because it's 5:59. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for, being here with us, and thank you for the panelists. You were awesome. Thank you so much. I hope this helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Nieves.
Thank you, everyone.